Kanye West, who now goes by Ye, sitting down with Tucker Carlson for a headline-making interview. The rap icon and fashion designer slamming liberals and the media for trying to silence free thinkers like himself. Take a listen.
My so-called friends / handlers around me told me, like, if I said that I like Trump, that my career would be over, that my life would be over. We are in a battle with the media. Like, the majority of the media has a godless agenda, and their jokes are not working. It was wild that I didn't know how close my own wife was to the Clintons. There was some manipulation. Me not saying I like Trump was a form of a manipulation. It just represents life. I'm pro-life. 50% of black death in America is abortion. So I really don't care about people's response. I perform for an audience of one, and that's God.
You can catch more of Tucker's interview with Ye later tonight, and here's an exclusive new clip.
Ooh. It drove me crazy to not be able to say that I like Trump. It drove, because think about it, it's me. Imagine me not being able to say what I wanted, because you got something you're thinking, but you're told you're not allowed to say it in public. Well, I never actually told people that I like Trump when he was running, because I was bullied by Hollywood.
I mean, there was a lot to unpack with that interview if y'all watched it. Jesse, what did you think?
I thought the lanyard around his neck was an interesting fashion statement. And the hat that said on it? The next year, 2023, I think you're going to see a lot of that in the streets pretty soon. The left is tenacious with the way they keep their base in check. He has to be destroyed because he's a black star. And he's moving away from the Democratic Party. Nationally, the Democrats can't win if they don't have about 92% of the black vote. So if he walks away from the Democrats and you see a stampede of other black voters follow him, Democratic Party's future is toast. So they can't have that. Now, it's also about the money, because you cannot be Kanye West, you can't be anybody and expect to get showered with cash by woke corporate America when you say you're ultra MAGA and you're pro-life and they're killing black babies. That's too hot. That is too hot. So you're already seeing people kind of pull away from him. Adidas is kind of getting squirrely. He had a concert canceled. The left says they don't believe in bullying, but if you're a black conservative, you will be bullied to death. The left says you can identify as anything, a tree, 6 genders. You cannot identify as a black conservative, and that's the truth.
You know, it's always amazing to me if a minority has any conservative views, the liberals left, I mean, their heads explode. They don't know what to do with it, and they come after us over and over and over again because we don't fit into their box. What do you think about the fact that they continue to do this with minorities for just speaking their truth, Judge?
Well, you know, the truth is, obviously, you were the first female governor. And, you know, on my end, 20, 30 years ago, I was the first female this, and this. And I got a lot of attacks. We do, because they then can't control you. I mean, we don't fit into the narrative. If you're a minority, you've got to be with them, and you've got to be, you know, subdued and be resentful of them being the conservatives. But I got to tell you, I watched that whole interview last night. I was blown away by Kanye West. I really was. And I said to myself, I said, you know, Janine, you forgot this guy is a self-made billionaire with a B. OK, his mother, I believe, was an educator. And he is one smart guy. He talks about how you don't just believe what people are saying to you. You know, you look beyond. And that's so obvious. But when he was talking about the Kushners, for example, and Josh and Jared and what was going on, and he talked about Jared in the Middle East. Isn't it great what he did in the Middle East? But he was also doing other stuff in the Middle East, you know? He's nobody's fool. And I was very impressed with him. I like a lot of what he said. I like that white lives matter. And it's not just freedom of speech. He has the chutzpah to say it. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if he's in line. And I like that.
Well, you know, and the thing is, he's a very talented musician. He's a great business person. But companies are now looking at reevaluating his endorsements.
Right.
What is he supposed to do if they try and cancel him? How do you take on, we already worry about how to take on the media. How does he take on the business community when they turn around and say, you know, and the other side of it is they love to say that minorities that are not liberal, that they're crazy, right? We're crazy because we don't know that we're supposed to be Democrats. How's he going to deal with the cancel culture on this?
I think he'll deal with cancel culture in the business community with the same independence with which he forms his opinions. I imagine he will continue to be a radical, innovative entrepreneur that hopefully finds new avenues of commerce outside of corporate America, global corporations. Because as Jesse pointed out, you're talking about corporations like Adidas looking to distance themselves from Kanye. Judge, I do not know what to make entirely of that interview. All I know is what I was watching was interesting. Yeah. It was fascinating. This was an unvarnished, authentic human being giving you their opinion in all self-awareness. He steps back at moments in that interview and goes, I don't know actually how I'm coming across right now. And there's such authenticity to that it just makes me want to hear more. But my main takeaway is the same that both Nikki and Jesse have pointed out, and that is the biggest reflection, Geraldo, in this to me is the way people react to Kanye. It truly is. There's an ugliness to the reaction that reveals the ugliness inside people. And if I just may finish this thought, I'm going to use inflammatory language, but I don't care because I think this is exactly how ugly it is. There are overseers on this plantation that do not want an independent black man to have an independent thought, and they're willing to destroy his reputation for exhibiting that independence. And it is about the ugliest thing I can imagine to deny a human being their individuality, to form their own opinions because of the color of their skin. It is beyond ugly.
You've been around the block enough, Will, to know that Kanye West is a provocateur. He is doing this to get a reaction. I remember very clearly Katrina, 2005. And he said, George Bush doesn't care about black people. So that was Kanye West also, but he was on exactly the opposite side.
But really quick, are you saying he's inauthentic? Just to be clear, are you saying he's inauthentic?
I am saying that when you have someone who is an artist and a performer and an entrepreneur, how much of what they're saying do they really believe, and how much are they saying for impact and effect? He knew, Kanye, sitting down with Tucker, first of all, why did he choose Tucker to do this interview? He knew that of all the people that would make liberals craziest, Tucker Carlson would be the guy. So there he sits with Tucker Carlson, and he has the pendant that Jesse referenced. It doesn't have like a fetus in it.
It's an ultrasound.
Fetus, yeah.
I mean, now, do people do that? Do people wear aborted fetuses, necklaces?
No. It's ultrasound.
And then it's an ultrasound.
Even if you take all of that aside, and I think that everybody wants to say that there's something wrong with him and how could he do this, and he had a lot to say. What I took away from it was, here is a minority male that is expressing conservative views. What I don't want is him being highlighted as an exception to the rule. There are a lot of minorities out there, African Americans, Hispanics, Indians. There are a lot of minorities out there who think like he does. And Republicans have to understand we have to expand the tent. There's a lot of Kanyes out there. He can only express it the way he did, but I hope that we go and start really recruiting the rest of them, because there are a lot of, especially African Americans, who saw during COVID that, you know, here you've got liberals who think they can't pick the school for their children, or they think that they can't go to the DMV to pick an ID so that they can go vote. Minorities have been treated poorly by the Democrats for a long time. This is Republicans' time to really seize the opportunity to have the discussion with them on why we focus to lift up everyone, not just a certain segment of the population.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.